Ladies and gentlemen, we are back. It has been a while. I took the last 3 or 4 weeks off, just enjoying a little break. Hopefully this is streaming live now. And yep, there it goes. It just popped up, so everything is working in live. But yeah, I just needed a break. You know, this is actually, October is the 11th anniversary of the show, so it's been going for a long time. Hans has been coming on the show for a full decade now. How does that feel, Hans?
I don't know, man. Feels cool. I mean, yeah, I can keep trying to say I'm 25 years old. I had a bunch of identity theft, happen recently, and a credit card stolen, and then I got the new card, and she's like, "When were you born?" 1998. Like, really? It's like, no, but I just wanted to say it, and then I think I almost got busted for, defrauding myself. But yeah, no, it's amazing how fast time goes. I mean, we just, we did that one show, and then I kind of, we never reconnected. And then I just kind of got into it. And then, as I've told the story, I wrote an outline, was supposed to be for one show, and it went on for, I don't even know how long. It was like, yeah, freight train of mayhem. But
yeah, well,
go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, well, tonight is your 44th time on the show. Wow, and so we've done what that would probably be like 80 or 90 hours of material if people want to go through it all. We're back on the main channel, obviously, for the first time in 3-4 months. The main channel was demonetized over total nonsense issues, and what they said was that I had too many re-uploads of other videos. There was 4 uploads out of 400, so like 1%, and they said that this was cause for them to demonetize my channel. So super chats are back up for those of you who want to support the show. Really appreciate any support. We are off of the backup channel for the first time since, what was it, like, I don't know, it must have been like May or June or something like that when they demonetized the thing. Somebody's talking about Hans hasn't investigated Fish. I have a bit, and who was it, the drummer of Fish, living in Maine, is like a convicted pedophile or whatever. I had, as far as I recall, but I had somebody send me a mailer that went around in Maine warning the neighbors of this guy from Fish, and I was just trying to pull up the database here, about his connections. Where the heck is my database link here? I must have updated the database. What were you going to say?
Yeah, actually, I have done some stuff on Fish on my now defunct radio show. The network went off the air yesterday. So that was the last show. But yeah, so I've done some other stuff on it. And, of course that's, one of the things that just because, I was giving such a big picture. I mean, you could go into any one of these bands. And I think that, if you look at it, the post Grateful Dead era, right, the jam band, the sarcophagus of the hippie movement, right, with all the LSD and all that stuff, and the new victims. And so Fish is kind of like the Beatles, and Tool's like the Rolling Stones, so to speak, of that. Then you've got a bunch of other sort of bands that spawned. So actually Fish, I even knew those guys, when I was like, I was like 10 years old. Okay. No, I was like 18, 19 years old, whatever. And they were playing like in the high school auditoriums and stuff, and so, when they first came out, because at that time I was, connected with, sort of the residual Grateful Dead scene, Rainbow Tribe, and that kind of thing. So I, and the fact is, even back then, they just got on my nerves, to be honest. Cause I always felt music should have some serious intention, and then having, technical virtuosity with these kind of, inane silliness. It just didn't vibe with me. Even if with the hot hippie girls were dancing, they left their bras at home. All right, Fish, but they still, I didn't really get into them, but I did certainly. I mean, they were extremely important. And that's really I mean, this is what spawned the entire jam band circuit, right? There's a whole array of acts and touring stuff, and there's not every band in the jam band market is necessarily bad, but yeah. So Fish is an interesting group, and we can go. There's I don't want to necessarily get off on a tangent, but maybe we'll go into that a bit later, because I think that it is interesting to look at some of these things, especially in detail, and maybe I'll just make a little list here. I'll carve it into my wrist.
Well, yeah. Do you have any razor blades?
I do actually. Yeah. I do. I have a bunch of them.
So somebody was saying that he got busted in Saratoga Springs for pedophilia. But hey, Brian, good to see you. But yeah, I've had that letter. Somebody sent that to me. It must have been 3-4 years ago when from Maine. He was running for public office in Maine. John Fishman was, and they sent out a mailer to all the people, all the houses and whatnot in his district. Got a hair on my nose about his, apparent pedophilic habits. I have not checked to see if he was convicted or not, so obviously we have to be careful with the language. But, yeah, nasty stuff, man.
Well, I mean, for me, it was just when Gary Glitter, Rock and Roll Part 1, everyone's been at a football game. Nah, nah, nah. Da, 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 and then Pete Townsend, of course, was doing research on pedophilia.
He's yeah. Air quotes.
And so, and I said, these guys are my heroes. And so the Fish thing, I was like, no, I just don't believe it. No, I'm just kidding. I mean, don't tell me it's not so, Pete. Teenage Wasteland. What kind of wasteland are you talking about there, Pete? The thing is, like, all the lyrics, it's kind of like with Queen, honestly, like, why, I still like the Village People. I mean, because they have some of the tightest, like, Macho Man has some of the funniest lyrics, but actually the music is, there's the best session musicians of the time playing on that. So that's actually a slamming track, right? But it's kind of like, well, of course, them, and then Queen, Fat Bottomed Girls, and then suddenly, when you ride your bicycle, and then you find out, these guys. And so all the the Pete Townsend things, pinball, plays a mean pinball, and so everything just took on this thing. And I just like, dude, I can't even listen to Pete, Roger Daltrey just trying to find a note. A couple times he's hitting that note in tune, not too often, but he does look good. He's like Robert Plant, he's like the Walmart version of Robert Plant. Didn't quite make it the Robert Plant, but he's still pretty good. But
all these links to the news articles regarding Fishman are down right now, but I can't find the active links to the news stories here. That's interesting. I'll try Google here. I don't like to use Google if I can avoid it.
Yeah, I do want to give a shout out to a band actually that it's quite good actually. They're called Fishmans. They're a Japanese group, and they really they predated a lot of the kind of reggae stuff, but they're really kind of beautiful, interesting, kind of intense music. They actually, the lead singer died quite young, but it's a Japanese group. Okay. And probably pretty obscure, but they're a pretty neat group. So like I said, I'm not against every style of music, even though, I did try to, all the goofy stuff, like smashing your guitar, like, that's just dumb. Trying to do the windmills, I dislocated my shoulder, knocked my teeth out trying to play with my teeth. Luckily I did all that stuff before I was 18, but the annex, are there, but fundamentally though, there's there's a darkness behind some of these artists, and especially the ones that seem the most, the happy, laughing, whimsical Fish. There's nothing serious, and as John Lennon says, nothing to get hung about, right? Nothing to get hung about, not hung up, but nothing to get hung about. There you go, the hangman, right? So, but it's kind of riffing here.
Do you ever get tired, or have you come to a point in the last decade since we started all these shows and all this research where you're just, are you still surprised at things that you find, or are you sort of just so deep in it, it's, nothing shocks you anymore?
Well, I mean, here's one thing is that I can't, like when I'm researching stuff, I'll go very deeply into it. I mean, my it's what I do, man. I play music, I play, I haven't had to play in a Beastie Boys cover band yet, thank God, or play in I wouldn't mind playing a Village People cover band, but I have to play, I tend to be, I don't do a lot of crap and stuff, but I play music, I do a lot of concerts. I also occasionally play in bars and this kind of thing. So, I have to kind of balance it. But certainly, it's something I've kind of alluded to, is you kind of have to go through the whole spectrum. And it's really important, not just, you can learn all the different facts, but you have to see how this affected and connected with your own being. And it may not have, it may have. And it's the more, I think, people that are the most resistant have actually had the deepest kind of effects from this music. But there's a lot of stuff, like some of this hip hop stuff. I can feel physically ill hearing certain types of music, and I just go away from it. But it's kind of like, I don't know, man. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. So, I'm very good at ignoring things that I don't have to. But, the thing is that the fact is that what we talked about is something that you mentioned in our earlier conversation today, Jan, is that, a lot of the stuff we talked about when we first mentioned it seemed pretty far out. Now it's just accelerated and gone to the point, of just every single day. If you look at all the occult symbolism, I could just go through 50 music videos. They continue to go more and more and more down and more degraded, more occult stuff, more mind control, more, pedophilia, cannibalism. And it's in the mainstream. People are promoting people with jobs, not like me, not like some dude who just plays sitar for a living, but people actually with reputed jobs are talking about, hey, we got to get over the hang up about cannibalism. And who was that person? Some psychologist just said, we have to, pedophilia needs to be
Camille Paglia, or whatever her name is, just came out saying that we got to promote NAMBLA and pedophilia. And then Richard Dawkins was out there a year or two ago promoting cannibalism. There was another one out promoting cannibalism recently. But, yeah, you can see the direction that they're going. And, when I contacted you, it must have been, 5-6 years ago. And I told you, hey, I was looking for somebody to do a series on music and mind control with. And I had mentioned to you that I think that music was the core foundation of mind control. And at the time you were like, no, I don't think so. And then after we started going through it all, you're like, yeah, man, wow, this is really where it's at. And so then, we laid all of this stuff out, and we did, 3 dozen shows on it, over 3 dozen shows on it. And now, as we've put it out and exposed it, they've sped things up, they've ramped it up. And another interesting thing, Hans, is they demonetized most of my shows with you, and they would put bogus copyright claims on. And a lot of the shows with you that I had already had, manually reviewed or whatever, when they demonetized my channel, I had to go back through and have them all manually rechecked. This time they actually seem to have approved a few more than they did last time. And in fact, this morning I got copyright claims removed from 2 of the shows with you. One of them was from the Grateful Dead series, and another one was from our War of the Worlds show. The one that where I went to Princeton and did all the research for that. But you can tell they do not want our research on music and mind control out there. One of the videos has like 40,000 views. These things should have gone viral years ago. Imagine if all of these shows that you and I have done had the proper 1 or 2 million views like they should have. We would have actually began to see a real change on the horizon from the years of trying to get this information out there.
Well, I'd be sitting on a yacht drinking margaritas with Jimmy Buffett, man, if that happened. But, and he's such a tightwad, dude. They try not to swear. Like I said, just as a preamble, just so people know that I'm not some kind of a maniac, but I've been extremely busy. In fact, it's been a great year, right? But pretty much nonstop work. I had sort of a light month, and I decided to remodel my bathroom. So I tore out the entire bathroom. I have no experience doing this in my life. I painted a couple walls. That's it. Just got it done. That was just a journey through hell. Took the walls out, toilet, sink. My wife is like, there's just a trail of debris, the whole, living room, toilet sitting on the backyard, it's just an awful, I did it with a pickaxe, man. I don't know what the hell I was doing. But that being said, I finished all that. And then I had to finish up these projects because I didn't do anything else except for finish the bathroom. And so I had to get all that stuff done. And I've been working since, about 6 p.m. yesterday. And now I'm here chilling out. So I'm still kind of going just through focus. So I'm not completely whacked out, but you get to see a different side. I guess I get a bit lightheaded, I feel more energized being here. But anyways, back to the topic. Fundamentally, see, why I'm not surprised is because what we did is everything is laid out. Even the laying the dead to rest, I can't stress enough. I mean, I think there's so much stuff in those shows because especially like Jerry Garcia, he's in 1990, he's talking about, everybody, becoming basically genderless, connecting, with these kind of, these suits, and everyone has their own private language, which is autism, right? So they're pushing autism spectrum. You have the new wonderful, you should be ashamed what you're doing to my future. How can you live with yourself? Okay.
Yeah.
That's not a very good
hysterical
Greta.
SJW. Yeah, total. And she's on Soros's payroll the whole time too. She's got a whole PR team and everything behind her. It's total crap.
I should have practiced that. I wanted to do the Soylent Green is people thing, but I just can't. I couldn't bring myself to do it. But the fact is that, see, this stuff, here's the thing, is that when we had talked about it, it is possible that just could have been a part of history. Maybe we read too much into it. Maybe there's some exaggeration. Maybe, we were, you focus on, you see the trees for the forest or vice versa, right? But if you just look at the progression, every single thing, even all the sidereal, all the, tangential, all the sort of other type of aspects have just continued to just grow and grow and grow to the point where, I do get shocked, here and there, it does happen, but it's just, I'm just looking at it like, it's, even that Pokemon Go stuff I talked about. I mean, that's right now, that's who's that new virtual reality, these virtual AI lady, what's her name? I blocked her name out. She's a weird video where you just see her eye. Maybe I'll send you a link for that. But they have these people that are actually this virtual reality with the full on, the artificial auto-tune thing. It's basically, when Cher first did that, do you believe in love after love? Suddenly everybody is doing this auto-tune. But then you see what's actually happening is this replacement, right, of the real lived world with this virtual world. So it doesn't even necessarily need the implant, right? The transhumanism is, in a sense, already upon us. And then basically you're raising, the level of child abuse that's going on now. I am stunned and shocked. And I could just go through so many examples. And that's something I never thought I'd see. A lot of these things, around 2016, I basically had kind of a vision of all this stuff. And I thought maybe 2030, 2040, maybe not. And it's like all this stuff, I'm like, holy crap, it's actually happening, but it's happening in such an aggressive, in your face way that unless your head is in the sand, I understand, I avoid, the media, right? Every time I see a television, I just fly into paroxysms of rage and just start cursing at it, and that's why I don't have any friends anymore, I put the TV, start yelling at it. My wife's like, can you just watch the show? And because you just see through it. It's transparent, but we have to see that, no, it's obviously of great import. And it's almost like the rush. They're trying to rush, they're trying to sell the brownies off, the little sugar cubes, right?
Well, it's like we were discussing before the show, Stranger Things, and you got Winona a writer in there, and her godfather was Timothy Leary. Her whole family is right in the core of that. And I tried to watch that show. Let me see if I can pull up her name here. How do you spell her name anyway?
Ryder.
R-Y. Okay, thank you.
Ryder
Horowitz. So yeah, her dad, Michael Horowitz, was a big guy in the promoting the CIA MK Ultra program, and he edited the book Moksha of Aldous Huxley's garbage, and of course Aldous Huxley was one of the key people behind the planning and orchestrating of MK Ultra. And then you got, he was pals with pedophile Allen Ginsberg, and then Timothy Leary.
Not Allen Ginsberg too? No. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, why is that? Allen Ginsberg, is that like off? But
he's
Allen
like,
Ginsberg is the most.
He's like the super pedophile.
Oh yeah, he's like he would be the uber pedophile. But it's like this book Yage Letters about ayahuasca, written between him and William S. Burroughs. It's the most disgusting thing I've ever read, and it's a journey of William Burroughs going around South America and checking, and he's telling all of his pedophile stories as he's traveling around, and who he diddled, and he kills one kid, and I think he kills one kid, and then he gets his underwear and stuff stolen, doing some other kid and whatnot. But it's a tour book for pedophiles to go around South America looking for the best places to diddle kids, dressed in a book about, in the sheep's clothing about ayahuasca and yage. And this is where the whole ayahuasca movement really comes from, is this Yage Letters book, and it's freaking disgusting, man.
Yeah, well, I think I want to just give a shout out to all the people that supported me. That book, it's not easy to write a book that fast, but I absolutely appreciate everybody who
you didn't even send me a copy of it, man.
Man, I put so much work into, man. I actually told a good friend of mine, I think he may be listening, and I told him, like, he's actually helped me out with some stuff. I said, man, you got to buy it too. I can't give it to you. No, because I put so much into it. I'm like, man, I just can't give this away. It's like an underground. It'll be an underground.
How many books have you written now?
To be honest, I have 8, 9 right now that are in, basically ready to go. Some of them are a little bit further along than others, but yeah, I have 9 completed books. I've got, 2 published, and I've got another 4 books that I contributed to the last year, actually. So yeah, all these books, man, that's the next thing I'm going to do, man, that's why I had to clear out the debris of my life and get back into doing that. But I just want to say, I really, absolutely appreciate, the people that have connected with me, on this journey. And I've actually met a number of people. In fact, this lady from Australia came out and saw me play in a bar in Columbus, Ohio, man. That was pretty wild. That was about a month ago. And I've ran into some people here and there, and, and it's cool. There's one guy, he's like, "You're not Hans Utter." I was like, "Yeah, I am." "You don't look like him." I was like, "Oh, okay." It's like, what do you think? I'm like Superman, or I look ugly? That's always fun. I've had a couple people say that to me, but that's great. I just say, man, when I see my balls, then you'll know who I am. But basically, I absolutely appreciate, the people, and, and that's the thing that, just to, help, help people along. Cause, the one thing is to understand is that there has been something that has been done. There's been a violence done to us. Right. And there is, and part of it is not, going beyond the fact that, oh, this didn't affect me, or this did, or not, or this or that. Just, human beings have always had proclivities. There's always been, things going on, but this kind of artificial, and this is like the third wave, right, of this massive top-down, absolute social cultural engineering that really started in, in the 19, you could say early part of the 20th century, but it didn't really gain steam. You have the jazz age, and you've got the rock and roll age, and you've got, of course, psychedelic rock and, classic rock, acid rock, and all, then on and on and on. But this is also coupled with the media, the educational system, the dietary crap, all the stuff that's going in the food, going in the water, these useless wars, these types of social control mechanisms. And there's also been a great demonization of the past, right? There's been a great deal of rewriting of history as well.
Yeah.
And that's severing people, right, from their identities. And I think that
anything from the past is just bad white people stuff that has no value. So we got to forget all that,
Well, not Pete Townsend, man. That's good white people stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. As long as he's diddling the little boys, he's okay. Some of these guys are just such slime balls. I mean, I'm making fun of Pete Townsend because that was just like the lamest excuse, I think he's a sir, but anyways, that's my little long-winded thing. But again, I absolutely appreciate people that have met me. They know that I am a true rock star in real life, anyways, but I'm just, I am exactly who I say I am, the greatest man in the world. No, I'm just some dude. I'm not just some dude, but, I try to, I feel that we're all in this together. And I think that the more that there is a sort of a level, I think that's what they're afraid of, is that, there's, you have like, the morphogenic field, whatever you want to call it. But there is an effect that the overall consciousness of those around you has on you yourself. And so as people start to become aware, and, living in Columbus, Ohio, I would say they were pretty much done for. But, I think there's a lot of people out there, and I think it's just helpful to see it. And then also, it's like, whether or not it affected you or not, that's fine. But I don't know how anyone could grow up in this culture unless they were like already enlightened bodhisattva, or else they lived in a cave, or they were like homeschooled and, whatever, and were a goat herder or something. I mean, all this stuff has been imprinted on our psyches, right? And an example is just the, these children's films. I was talking to my friend, Disney World, and even these Disney films. Some of these things are really terrifying, right? And there's some of the stuff that kids are exposed to, this violence, this stuff, and this terrifies the children. And so or probably terrified us, like Willy Wonka, man, he's pretty creepy. So all this stuff, when you have that fear response, right, just like the false flag stuff, is that you're very open to imprinting. And so all this stuff, it took me a while to actually believe that something could be so malevolent and so sort of top-down driven and so understood, because it seems like it's impossible, right? So how could people do this? How could people do this?
I think, to their own demise and future at that, that's what's mind-boggling to me.
What I mean is that, you think how, because at first it just seems absurd. Come on, these are just some stoned out hippie guys, Jerry, man, Jerry's like my uncle. He's just a big fat teddy bear. I want to give Jerry a big hug. As long as he's had a shower in the past month. I'm just kidding. Oh, sorry about that.
Yuck.
I don't mean to say that about Jerry. I never met
I mean, he probably hadn't had a shower in the last month or two.
I think he's probably like, I don't honestly like, let's see, I'm trying to think of, Mickey Hart. I ran into Mickey Hart here and there or whatever. He's a drummer dude. He's kind of more of a bit player, but I never met Jerry. I wouldn't be surprised though. Just like, Alice Cooper, there was, this, I remember that actually when I was a kid or something, like Alice Cooper was on the golf course with like Bob Hope and Gerald Ford, like Mr. Crazy Rock Star hanging out with Gerald Ford. Gerald Ford, probably the most one of the most boring men that ever lived. But Bob Hope, man, I mean, so he was dialed in, right? He was living the elite lifestyle, based on what Jerry said, right, about transhumanism, about artificial intelligence, about merging us into the great singularity, and this being the freedom, right, where everybody has their own private language. That's actually such a terrifying thought, is that there's no longer any way to communicate, where you just float around in your own mind, tripping out, your own thought bubbles. I mean, it's extremely dark. And so Jerry was highly intelligent. And so I wouldn't be surprised that Jerry actually was pretty much, whining and dining, hanging out, with, going to the Rothschild mansion and stuff and whatever.
Eating 5-year-olds for breakfast and whatnot.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know if Jerry was not. Maybe Jerry got a conscience and they knocked him off, or he just did too much dope. He got too fat. I don't know, man. But the thing is that people.
I met Mountain Girl once, and I got nothing positive to say about meeting her. That was obviously Jerry's wife, for those who know.
Yeah. And for those who think I'm being a sarcastic asshole, I am, because I'd rather these people, when you see, if you look at the Grateful Dead and you start calculating, because and like lots of people, I've had many people reach out to me. In fact, there's a lot of material I've never even gotten into, people that were very close to the Dead. I know people personally. I got many, many stories of people who just, went from, I know, myself, I've seen and knew a number of people like that. Say one example, a girl, straight A student, goes to 2 Dead shows. She ends up prostitute, 5 to 10 years later, she's dead. Yeah. I mean, and this happened to hundreds of thousands.
Well, last summer I went to the Dead and Company show out in L.A., and that was probably like I don't know, I've probably seen them like 10 times or something like that, but I hadn't gone in like 15, 20 years, and I just wanted to go to the show to observe all of the, social degradation and whatnot that had gone on in that time, and I'm just trying to see if I can find some images of it, but, it was quite interesting being at this show and seeing just the train wreck of people that were there at this thing. It's like the Grateful Dead goes through and they leave behind a wash of destroyed lives, and then, it's the other, so in August 2009, I interviewed Chris Conrad, author of Hemp Lifeline to the Future, and co-authored with Mickey Norris's wife, Shattered Lives, Portraits of America's Drug War. And they were behind a lot of the promotion. I had reached out to Chris last week to see if I could get him on the show, to see if he still believes all of this needle exchange crap and everything that they were promoting, 2 decades ago. And, because all you have to do is walk around California in these big cities where you have needles, feces, the plague, rampant crime and everything. And you can see the total wipeout that these liberal drug policies have caused. And so, what they did for their book was really an inversion where, the drugs themselves didn't cause any shattered lives. It was the drug laws trying to stop it. It's like this libertarian philosophy that, that people should be able to sell and do whatever drugs they want without any ramifications for the damage done to families and society as a whole. So, I guess it was actually 2017 I went to that show. But, you see the damage all over society these days. And, it's just absolutely crazy. But here's this Dead show, the Dead and Company show from 2017. I can't believe it's already been 2 years since I went to that concert. But, just the parking lot, going in, into the place, just the whole freaking place was filled with wipeouts. And then, you know, there's who knows how many hundreds of thousands, millions of people that had their lives destroyed by this. But we're going to blame the government and the people who were locked up because of the drug war. We're going to claim that those are the poor victims and not, you know, who knows how many tens of thousands of people died from heroin, from all of the drug overdoses and everything, you know. And we're supposed to believe that it's the drug war that was the problem and not the Grateful Dead and this whole hippie philosophy, you know, and you bought into it. I bought into it. You know, I was fully into that garbage, you know. It's like I wrote 2 books, you know, especially my first book promoting psychedelics and stuff like that. And now I look back and it's just like, you know, it's a nightmare.
And Jan, weren't you tripping? I think you're actually on mushrooms that radio, the first show we did together.
I don't think so. You talk about in 2000.
I'm messing with you, man. Just joking. But yeah, you know, well, I'm actually going to have to diverge a little bit with you in that statement because now, if you really want to see something that, and this is something, I mean, I'm seeing this stuff happen real time, right? So, for example, there's a place I go over the summer. It's these beautiful small town in Ohio, Amish country, right? I hadn't been there since I guess 2008. I forget when. It's about a year, maybe a little more than a year, 16 months. I went back there, man. It's just wiped out. It's devastated. You go down, you don't even see anybody under 30, really. There's some old people there. You go in the Walmart, there's prostitutes. And I mean, this is in Amish country, it's a beautiful rolling hills. They have like the cheese museum. It's a nice area, beautiful area. And it was sort of the heartland. I've just seen that in maybe a year and a half. It's flattened. I mean, it is flattened. I mean, there's nothing left. And I used to, love, it's called the Kokosing River. I got a little place down there right on the river. It's kind of like it's a vacation home, trailer thing. It's like not a, I don't hang out with the, with Bill Gates and Davos or something, but, it's a Kokosing camp and canoe, man, with all the rednecks. But used to, beautiful place, but they had this 10-mile nature trail. Whole nature trail is overgrown. I'm literally saying I went to Walmart. It was like something out of Dawn of the Dead. It was frightening, man. It was, I mean, like I said, they had prostitutes up there. People were just, I mean, I'm seeing that in my eyes. Ohio is actually the epicenter of this opioid crisis. So what you had happen here is that there's several different factors. I mean, one of them is that, okay, first of all, you have, of course, the wonderful Sackler family, which massively pushed the opiates, for everyone, whatever ails you, and then they cut off the opiates. But suddenly, as a friend of mine who's a cop said, actually one of my novels, people should read it. I was researching the novel. I was actually hanging out with him, going out, on patrol and stuff. But it's cheaper to buy heroin to get you, a really nice amount of heroin than it is to buy a 6-pack of beer. Okay, and this stuff is coming from where? It's from Afghanistan. I mean, but and so what happened is they cut the stuff off, and then at the same time, you have to put this in the context of the jobs, right? All the mills are gone. All these things had these nice industrial centers, right? So these small towns, this was the backbone of America. And
have you seen what's become of those towns, that if they're not totally wiped out now? But yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it's just, it's really, it's such a human tragedy. And that's why, when I hear that white privilege shit, I'm sorry, I'm like, you take that and you just eat it for breakfast or something, man, because, the privilege is that you've destroyed the fabric of this land as it was. Maybe, it was better, with Pocahontas and stuff. And, it probably was, but it hasn't been that way for like 300-400 years or plus. And they didn't have electricity, much less, roads and everything like that. But the fact is that so what you have actually is that you have the stuff, then you have it being promoted. You create a lifestyle, you take away the jobs, you have the sense of despair. Also, though, it's promoted within the media, within the counterculture, within the popular culture, right? So notice all these people, these rock stars, Kurt Cobain, man. I know a bunch of, right, we graduated high school, right? You know, when Nirvana came out, you know, I saw him playing at Stashes here. He
Yeah,
was
dude,
just,
I remember when Nirvana started coming out when I was a senior in high school, and I just thought the music was terrible at the time. That's funny.
I used to play there with my punk band, the Shamed Insane, right? We had, the drummer had just one, he just had one tom. It was actually pretty funny group, but we didn't open for Nirvana, but you know, the guy let us go in there, but Kurt was just sitting there, you know, sitting there at a table, right? Just, I don't know, man. I didn't talk to him or anything. I mean, he was like, there's Kurt Cobain. He's just this dude kind of like, you know, he's kind of, I mean, I was pretty, you know, I was much younger.
You remember his wife's dad was the manager for the Dead, Hank Harrison.
Yeah, and Hank Harrison was well. Who was he a protege of?
Courtney Love's dad. What's that?
Who was he a protege of? The first principle of community organizing is community disorganizing. The wonderful guy that dedicated his book to Lucifer. That's right, Saul Alinsky. So
yeah, that's right.
He was a direct protege of Saul Alinsky. In fact, Saul Alinsky said, you know, go forth, young men and young women, go forth and experiment in the field.
You think I should try to get Hank Harrison on the show again? I emailed with him a bunch of times. He wasn't real happy with us exposing all this shit.
Well, you know, I don't, you know what? I'm going to have an open mind and say, he said, you know, you just, you know, I'm not going to get in his face. I mean, like, dude, you're Hank Harrison, man. But I have an H in my name too. I named Hans. We got, you know, at least one letter of our names in common. So, you know, we got something in common. But this is one of the things that I highlighted that people don't realize is that Saul Alinsky, right, who is the current social, this world, our modern, the Antifa, all the protests, all this stuff that's going on in the universities. This is 100% Saul Alinsky. It's sort of, you know, 100% his manual, his manifesto. I mean, and that's and then so Hank Harrison, Grateful Dead.
Hillary write one of her dissertations on Saul Alinsky too?
She did, yeah, she did. You know, and she's Hillary's just. I'd like to hang out with Hillary, man. She's like a dragon lady, you know. I bet she like.
Well, yeah, she sits there, you know, sucking the bone marrow out of children's legs, you know, at dinner time. Just.
She's probably. I mean, the thing about Hillary is, I was going to go to one of her rallies. It was here, and I was just going to try to confront her, and I had this nightmare that she's like has this superhuman strength. You come up there, she's like picks you up, you know, crushes your neck and throws you in the air. I mean, she's kind of like a, you know, I mean, she could be like a superhero, you know. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if she could just like pick up a car and throw it.
Yeah, well, you know, because she's, you know, I mean, so many people had disappeared, and there's so many bodies in the Clintons' wake and stuff. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if she could do that. She's probably like Satan incarnate. But you know what? You know, people are asking the name of the Grateful Dead, and you and I had talked about this before, and then I figured it out. Because when you read the New Testament, it talks about those who are asleep and who don't understand that truth is God. They're called the dead, and they're not awake. They're just kind of blissfully ignorant. They're dead. They're not awake or aware. And so the grateful dead are those who are grateful to be dead or asleep or high on drugs or under the influence of narcotics, etc. They haven't woken up to Logos yet. So, you know, when you read the New Testament, you can see that this is where the idea of the Grateful Dead comes from, and it's very in your face at that point.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Grateful Dead, you know, and again, the main critique I used to have, you know, about the Grateful Dead is that, you know, Jerry Garcia, just his guitar solos are boring. I'm not a great singer, that's true, but I don't like out-of-tune vocals. Like, you know, you want me to sing Saint Stephen?
Oh yeah, sure. Stephen. I can actually sing pretty well, but you know, I do it like kind of weird ad hoc stuff, like in the moment. Like somebody will say,
"Dude, I'm gonna sing."
Somebody will say 3 words, and I'll turn it into a song, and I do it all the time. It's pretty weird.
Okay, Jan, I think that was a little bit of a one-upmanship there, bro. So we're gonna have a $50. Who's the better singer?
I don't know if I could do it live, man. I've never tried it into a microphone before.
You never tried it into a microphone. Yeah, like
singing, smart ass.
Singing. I know. But you know, so the Grateful Dead, Yeah, I am being a smart, but the reason I'm being sort of flippant, that's, $50. Who's the better singer? We have to pick. Just don't make me sing Zeppelin, please. I don't have.
Oh, sorry.
You got to sing. Now, where does his note start? He's all the way up. He's like
eunuch soprano.
Well, he's like a mezzo soprano female range, but I see. I'm tempted.
I just had to throw in the eunuch thing.
But I think that your air guitar didn't have enough soul on it, so I think I got 1 point. $50 on it.
Well, we weren't judging for air guitars, and you're a real guitarist, and I'm not. So,
touche.
I had a guitar once when I was 14, but I never learned how to play. So there's my limit right there.
Did you smash it like Pete Townsend? Should have just smashed it.
I came home one day and my dad had sold it. Actually,
that's even worse. You probably regret that day. I could have been like Sid Vicious. No, but back to the Dead. Again, that's the reason I'm kind of being joking, just because I'm so angry inside, because these guys, you know what? I've been nuts. I've actually haven't sworn for almost like 6 months. So, and I'm not going to do it. Is that
why you're swearing tonight?
I didn't really swear. I mean, the SH word is not really swearing. I didn't say anything. If I start swearing, man, the whole rest.
I think around me, most people have stopped saying the GD word and stuff. People are kind of like over saying that term, at least, because once you get what logos is, you don't want a damn truth anymore.
Yeah. Well, there is a certain type of rage, though, wherein the words, because our language, I can go into very high levels of erudition to describe the debacle that these malignant ne'er-do-wells have done. But when you realize that it's, first of all, there's innocence, right? There's an age of innocence. You have exploration. It's not that per se even rock and roll is inherently evil, but the movement's been co-opted, and these guys are, okay, again, the Warlocks, you've got all these guys got intelligence connections. Jerry Garcia, of course, had top security working in a missile silo, and they just let them out. And then they do this band, and they're doing the acid test, which you went into. When you look at the acid test and just see their glee, as they're just probably permanently traumatizing and damn, I mean, could you imagine me tripping balls around those freaks, but anyways, and then of course, the Ken Kesey driving around the country, distributing LSD all over the country. So what LSD did, what that did, I mean, first of all, I would stand by, which I said many times, is that the craziness we see today, like the 5-year-old kids being taught how to masturbate or simulate anal sex. They're learning about anal sex at age 5 now in our elementary schools. Where's the outcry? That would not have been possible if it hadn't been for the hippie era, because the disillusion of the center, and then there's a point where you can kind of float around and you get comfortable in this and that, but there's a point also that either you have to go cross over and embrace the darkness, or else just, I guess you just live as this kind of, this like, white bread. Man, I just really want to swear, man, but I'm stopping myself. All right. You're just a white bread piece of junk. And, you do that. But again, these guys, this was not an accidental thing. This counterculture, this is what we look at, the work of the LSD research, MK Ultra project. They said the next phase is to explore, disseminate into very large scale social groups. Also, it's almost like the vectors of a disease, right? So what you're doing, they had, you can have your prison, populations, right? I used to, as a 3-year-old kid, I used to hang out with Leonard Peltier, actually, in Lewisburg Penitentiary. And they did a lot of, that's like a hardcore maximum security prison. I'm sure everyone knows who Leonard Peltier is, right? The Native American guy. Yeah.
So you were hanging out in there, like serving
time? I literally was. I would literally, I myself did not go there on my own volition, but I was taken there by my parents, who were working with the Free Leonard Peltier campaign. So we got to hang out. I met him. It was, I don't know. It's kind of a blur. They probably slipped me some LSD, I mean, they were doing MK Ultra experiments stuff actually at Lewisburg Penitentiary.
Yeah.
But anyways, so you have these different sort of, you have, of course, the CIA, giving it, you got the, the men, hanging out with the prostitutes with the one-way mirror, and then they're tripping. I wonder, how that went. Probably a lot of stuff went down, and of course the wonderful scientist who jumped out the window, But so that was the first range of experimentation. But these are closed populations, right? So you got a prison population, and basically, I mean, if you heard these stories, right? They basically got all the heroin they wanted, right? As long as they just took these massive doses of LSD every single day. Like these guys were taking so much LSD in the prison, they were just getting like, I mean, it was like, Jim Morrison, the Lizard King, man, we didn't even have a thumbnail on these cats. I mean, these guys were taking like 20 sheets a day of LSD, 50 sheets, I mean, just massive amounts. And then they get their heroin and beer, and these guys are all in prison. I mean, that must have been a weird time for sure. But what do? You disseminate it into the population. You set the ground with, of course, the doors of perception, right? If the doors of perception were cleansed, we could see nature as it is infinite, which I agree with, right? The doors of perception. But what indeed are the doors of perception? Who is the perceiver? Where is the mind? What is the mind? What is truth? Is there a truth? Now, where we start going wrong in this journey is that, yes, the doors of perception are diluted. They are clouded. We don't see what's around us. Most people see their projections, their habits. They see what they have to do, and they don't even see the other people around them, and that's a fact. So but let's move on a little bit further. And the doors of perception are cleansed by how? Through, well, I guess you can, do this.
Taking massive doses of psychedelic drugs per Aldous Huxley, who wrote The Doors of Perception.
Well, of course, yeah, Aldous Huxley, but also through this kind of meditation, this kind of Course in Miracles, like that's back in the news. That another one, a little MPL too.
Yeah, well, that was who, and I want to talk about Arthur Stoll in a minute, but hold on a second. I just want to bring that up because that was what was his name? Sorry, that was written by Helen Schuckman and William Thetford, and William Thetford was CIA MKUltra subproject 89 and 69, and people can look the citations up there in the database, but the Course in Miracles, and Carl Rogers was over him, and he was a big CIA doctor, and he was behind the manufacturing of neurolinguistic programming and nonviolent communication, and oversaw Marshall Rosenberg that promotes all the NVC crap. And he was involved in the Changing Images of Man project out of Stanford, and then he was part of MKUltra subproject 97. But going back to really quickly, because people were talking about LSD in there, and somebody brought up they'd like to know more about the invention of LSD before it was handed off to Albert Hofmann. And, I've looked into that, and I strongly believe that Arthur Stoll is really who invented LSD. And then probably around 1918 to 1928 or so. And then they had, 20 plus years of time to do human experimentation. And then to cover it up and make it look like a brand new investigation, they passed the invention over to Albert Hofmann, who was under who was under Arthur Stoll at Sandoz. But Arthur Stoll in his book, oh goodness, now this thing is going crazy here. If I can get it up here, in his book, he talks about how. In this company, he was president from 1949 to 1956, director from 1964. He held the office of president of the board. He developed, together with his employees, a range of methods for producing drugs. Thus, he developed the first isolation of ergot alkaloids as ergotamine and ergobacin, and then cardiac glycosides, which are used as a medicine for heart diseases and migraines. A continuous process for the production of soluble calcium salts was developed, but I think this was going on much before then. And then there's this really weird book by Picard called Liquid Conspiracy on page 71. And, the book doesn't hold a lot of credibility, but, you know, it was an interesting read. And in it says, according to Al Hubbard, Hoffman's knowledge of LSD effects came about several years prior to his recollection. So, you know, there's the other issue there, and why the disputed chronology. Is there something to hide? If there is something to hide, it may lie in the early series of experiments with LSD conducted by Hoffman's supervisor, Dr. Stoll. These tests were often conducted without the knowledge and permission of his patients. This pattern was unfortunately repeated on numerous occasions and resulted in the destruction of many lives. The conclusions of the study were published in the Swiss Pharmacological Journal. The new ergot alkaloid, Arthur Stoll Science, new series, blah, 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 and you can see the citation here. But, you know, so, and then Leo Perutz wrote the book, St. Peter's Snow, like a decade before LSD was supposedly discovered, discussing the invention of a drug found in grains that was used to start a communist revolution. And I've talked about this in my articles before, but, you know, people can read all of that. What was that article? I forget, but it may have been the second or third one in the series I did on the invention, or on the whole history of MK Ultra on my website. Found it, you know, on the website there at logosmedia.com. But and then Max Perutz, interestingly enough, I tried to track these guys, and I emailed with one of his relatives, and of course, as soon as I started asking the right questions, the responses got cut off. But his cousin, Max Perutz, was a member of the Royal Society and Nobel Prize winner, and then that's pretty much where it got cut off. But I couldn't get any more responses out of them after I had followed up. And then, interestingly, Francis Crick was, you know, in working relationship with Max Perutz, and of course, Francis Crick was who claimed that he got a lot more research capacity using LSD, and then he was the guy who came up with DNA testing and whatnot. And then, you know,
yeah, also
Carrie Mullis. What's that?
No, it's interesting. Like DNA testing was, I think that they were on an LSD trip when they came up with that, as well as, you know, the Apple computers and, you know, all that. Right. So it's interesting, these mythologies. And, you know, I'm just gonna throw this out there. And Jan, this is the really important information, because this, you know, to go through this is a rock solid case. There is no, you know, it's not something that just is floating out in space. And again, you should know them by their fruits, right? We're witnessing that right now. But anyway, yeah, just go ahead, man.
No worries, you know, but, you know, the whole invention of LSD thing is really interesting. Willis Harriman, who is another working in MK Ultra, you know, and I wrote about this whole issue in my article, geez, what was it called? Spies in Academic Clothing. Let me just pull it up here really quickly. But, you know, I wanted to read this quote because he makes it clear in his quote, Willis Harriman does, and just let me show who he was in the database.
Yeah, I'm not. Is there any way I can see that? I guess.
Well, you'd have to see it on the YouTube screen where the audience can see it. Sorry about that.
You know, I've never done that. I'm going to do this for the very first time.
And hopefully we don't choke out your internet there.
Yeah.
But, you know, so Willis Harriman, Project MK Ultra, he was a part of the Changing Images of Man project again, Institute of Noetic Sciences, etc., Stanford Research Institute. But, so let me see, in a curious connection, senior scientist at Stanford Research Institute, known as SRI, the initiator of the Institute's Futures Research Program, and later the president of the Institute of Noetic Sciences, suggested in an interview on ABC Radio in 1977 that the origins of LSD began with an esoteric or mystical movement, specifically following the 20th century mystic Rudolf Steiner. As Harriman explains, the story of LSD really starts in 1935 with a group of followers of this German mystic, and members of this group set out very deliberately to synthesize chemicals which were like the natural vegetable substances, which they were well aware had been used in all the world's major religious traditions down through the centuries. Of course, Genesis 3 in the Bible warns against that, but, they have to add their spin, which I fell for, obviously, in the early 2000s with my first book. As Harriman continues, by 1938, they had synthesized psilocybin, LSD, and about 30 other drugs. Harriman thus suggests that LSD had been deliberately synthesized for its connection to religiosity, and at least 5 years before our history records say that the substance was first administered to a human by Hoffman himself. More extraordinarily, Harriman's remarks directly make the claim that psilocybin had been identified and isolated at least 20 years before the time on the record in all of the histories of psilocybin about the first identification, isolation, and chemical synthesis of this alkaloid by Albert Hoffman and his colleagues in 1958, and at least 7 years before the first Western study of the use of magic mushrooms by R. Gordon Wasson in 1955. Harriman's claims are not supported by any written evidence, so it would be irresponsible to speculate too long on the possibility. And this is from Rudge TV, but interestingly, so here we have Dr. Willis Harriman at Stanford Research Institute working on changing images of man. He's an MKUltra doctor. He's working with Al Hubbard, Humphrey Osmond, Dr. James Fadiman, Timothy Leary, Joseph Campbell, Oscar Janiger, Sidney Cohen, all these MKUltra con artists. And he's saying that this is the real timeline of this stuff. And then we're supposed to believe, the last comment, but there's nothing in the written record to support this, as if the CIA is going to, put that on the front page of the frickin' New York Times, right? So when we go into Spies in Academic Clothing, I had written that up as well. Let me see if I can find it. Let's see. The story starts way back in 1935 with a group of followers of the German mystics. So basically, I've got the same thing there. 5 years later, in 1943, when Europe was in really bad shape, they decided, apparently, that possible... Here, let me see. That possible negative... Yeah.
Sorry, I think I'm tripping. I'm watching myself on the YouTube, and it's like this weird delay, so I feel like I'm tripping.
Yeah. There's like a 15-second delay there, so sorry about that. But
no, that's cool. But keep going, man. Sorry.
No worries. So let's see. Decided apparently that possible negative consequences were nothing compared to the consequences of not doing this. So basically they saw what was happening with World War I and World War II, that the elites created as a genocide against the masses. And then they blamed the masses for the genocide. The people who were genocided get the blame for it. Of course, typical inversion and spin there. And then now 2 members of this group, which lived in a very tight religious community, were in the Sandoz Chemical Laboratory. That's partly how this project came to be. One of them was the chemist Dr. Albert Hoffman. He cooked up the newspaper story that everyone has heard now about the accidental ingestion of LSD and the realization of what its properties were after an amazing bicycle ride home and the visions and so on. This group quietly gave supplies of the chemical to a number of doctors around the world. And that's from Willis Harriman from that ABC Australian radio book that the other quote mentions. But they cover up this whole idea, and clearly Harriman is admitting here that the whole Bicycle Day story is, nonsense drivel for retarded hippies to believe, and, go celebrate LSD, yay, and meanwhile it's this whole mind control thing, but, it covers up the 20 some odd years of prior human experimentation. And, from Arthur Stoll, and my light is giving me issues here, from Arthur Stoll and these guys, and then moves the invention 20 to 25 years forward. What was it? I guess 1948, I think, was the actual invention date. And it's like I'd have to go back and reread my own work. It's been a while. But so they use Albert Hofmann as a cover story to cover up the invention and all of the years of prior human experimentation that they had done, including, you know, Pont Saint Esprit and all of this other stuff that, you know, came about later, which I wrote about.
Yeah. Well, let me just, dude, singing. I better throw some facts out there. We may have to forego the singing contest here. If I don't have a psychological breakdown watching myself, looks like some kind of a big, what is that?
Well, your forehead is huge, you know, so you're going to have to, it's going to make you really focus on it now.
No, it's just because of the weird place. Was it the guy that
I just learned the term this
Shamu.
week, five head.
The Shamu. When I saw myself, I was looking at Shamu, the killer whale, you know, but there ties into John Lilly. You know, let's just keep going with this, because you start to see, first of all, we've got, you know, David Snyderman, who was the guy that was hanging out with the Rolling Stones, passing out LSD with them. You got this, you know, and then connected also potentially with the pedophilia. You've got this whole, of course, you got Owsley, right, who was one of the largest LSD distributors in the world, who also helped bring about the demise of the 60s by providing STP, which is, even though, of course, Jimi Hendrix's song, The Stars Up Above, that played with Laughing Sam's Dice, STP, LSD, right? STP, basically people would go on these have total psychotic breaks they would never recover from. And because of the latency time, how long it took for STP to take place, for that stuff to hit, people would take these huge doses, and a lot of times they'd be permanently psychotic. It was just a horrendous thing.
But it's the drug war that's causing the destroyed lives. Well, that's what Chris Conrad and these guys want us to believe, right?
And what does STP stand for? Of course, serenity, tranquility, and peace. But
right. Well, did I ever tell you I had an email exchange with Tim Scully, who was one of the producers of Orange Sunshine and STP and this crap? Did I ever tell you about my email exchange with him?
No, you did.
He had just gotten out of prison. He had served like 10 or 20 years in prison for, you know, pushing LSD out onto the kids and destroying hundreds of thousands of people's lives. And he was just the nastiest, you know, person. I should publish those emails one day, but he is just a real, you know what? I don't even want to say it. Like you know, again, it's somebody that you can't say anything good about, you know. But you know, who would go around for the CIA, and he was under direction of Aldous Huxley and Stanley Bear Owsley. And you can read about it in the Brotherhood of Eternal Love, page 82 forward, and 88, 89, and 112 by Tendler and May, and Storming Heaven, page 315 and 316. But this guy was making massive quantities of LSD and helping the Merry Pranksters and these people and the Grateful Dead promote it, along with Stanley Owsley, you know, and destroying as many people's lives as he possibly could.
Yeah, and I'll just I'll draw kind of a wide net here just to touch on a few other things it's connected to, right? So we have this LSD stuff. We have this connected with Jimmy Savile. We have this connected with this pedophile rings. We have Reese saying that, and this is a direct quote, we need just the psychological shock troops. This is right after World War II. You know, these psychological shock troops will sort of basically transform the society. But these, of course, will be the brainwashed psychological shock troops. And then notice this process of conditioning is that you have this sort of, we can do anything, love's going to change the world. And then suddenly you got Altamont, you got STP, you've got, you know, Charles Manson, you know, hanging out there with Rosemary's Baby, which is amazing because I just watched that movie again, man, and that ties into this stuff so much. You know what they say in Rosemary's Baby? They said, Satan is born. It's now year one. 1966 is year one.
Do you remember when I interviewed Sue Palakas, the the mother of that baby that was killed in that? Do you remember that years ago?
Vaguely, you know,
remember Vito Palakis?
Vito. Oh yeah, Vito. Yeah, Vito. The Vito was the guy. This is like, that's one of those weird, you know, Vito's this guy, like, you know, I mean, he's hanging out with these like 18, 19-year-old, 20-year-old kids, and he's like what, pushing late 40s, and he's this kind of creepy, swarthy kind of you know, Neanderthal type of dude. And they'd go out, and nobody liked these bands. You know what? Everyone hated the bands. They thought they sucked. But then these, you know, the freak dancers, they'd show up and they just dance and freak out. And then, you know, the audience started to come because of this huge spectacle. And of course, Zappa very clearly calls this out. I mean, if you listen to his albums, like Absolutely Free, We're Only in It for the Money, you know, like who would know, they would freak out. And I mean, freak out in Boston, or like, see what, you know, I'll try to remember, I know, I'll leave home. I'll go sleep on Owsley floor or whatever, you know. So he was making this stuff in 1967, even before the Summer Love, because he was right there, you know, and sort of mocking kind of a controller.
Yeah.
I do think, I mean, Zappa definitely is a quite talented musician.
You know, it's funny, as I searched Palakis, and somebody used the image from my website for him on churchandempire.blogspot for that. But, you know, this is the image I have. This is Sue here, you know, and she, of course, denied everything in the interview and played stupid. But it was hard to buy her narrative. And, of course, you know, he was in his 30s when they started sleeping together, and she was, what, 16? So, you know, there's that pedophilia thing again, you know?
Well, I mean, 1966, you know, that's the year, right? That's year one. And Rosemary's Baby, this all ties in. But I'll just throw a few more things out there. So then what we have in 1970, we got what? Club of Rome, Future Shock. You know, we've got all these, you know, population bombs. So all this kind of, you know, end of the world stuff, gloom and doom. You can't have kids. You gotta just, you know, have lots of, get divorces and just, you know, find yourself. It's the me generation, which ties into A Course in Miracles. And then which ties into what? It ties into cybernetics and ties into cyberspace and ties into the modern internet, because that was absolutely 100% connected with cybernetics, the whole cybernetic systems theory, the cybernetic types of programming, where the word, of course, cyberspace, all this stuff grew directly. This was the secondary offshoot of this whole thing, where you have kind of the scientific arm, and you, of course, have God and Gollum, right? God and Gollum. And that is the Gollum, right? And Reese's Gollum is the Gollum. The psychological shock troops are the hippies. You know, we can change the world. But anyways, so all this stuff has happened, and it's actually really fascinating how it's all interconnected together. And in fact, how much that they reveal, like the Grateful Dead. I'm Uncle Sam. How do you do? You know, if you understand, you know, but the other thing is just, I'll let you go, you know, back on your stuff, because you've got the, you know, the onslaught of facts, which I love. But look at Course in Miracles, man. Course in Miracles, how much work that took to put that thing together. And I'll say, I went through that whole damn book, man, when I was
I went through about like 220 or 30 lectures or lessons before
then it started to repeat. This is a miracle. I'm seeing a miracle. Okay. But, you know, I mean, I know people, hopefully my family members aren't listening to this. They're really into it now. Probably they'll really hate me. But I mean, because the thing is, though, it's so insidious. And that's what I want to stress, is that there is this sense, okay, the doors of perception are closed, right? There is a sense that we can have a much greater connection with the universe, with the worlds, with ourselves, you know, etc. That's true. I don't disagree. I think that there are higher modes of perception. There's higher levels, higher vistas of consciousness. Okay. So that being said, Aldous Huxley, ultimately, what does he conclude his perennial philosophy, that book that I read like it was a Bible, is that, you know, he said basically, just turn off your mind and just kind of, you just got to stop thinking and just sit there, and, you know, and then you're like God, then you are God.
And do drugs, dude, and listen to the Grateful Dead, man.
Well, the perennial philosophy, though, was the shot across the bow. That was a pre-psychedelic. That was a scientific version of it, right? That was a scientific version of it, where that was a shot across the bow. But then
really quickly, 101 EZB says, heavily promoted in America, calls for the making of the public to want a hive mind through psychic experimentation. Have you heard of this? I mean, yeah, that's kind of what we've been talking about through all of our shows and through like a decade of this show.
I had a very extensive segment. In fact, there's a great interview with the Whole Earth Catalog guy, right? And he's saying that, I was hanging out
with Brand,
Mr. Brand, well, I'm just trying to use his name is Whole Earth Catalog guy. That's the whole Earth. That's our one world. And he says very directly, he's like, hey, we were doing experiments. Every day would be a different type of an experiment. We were actually really scientists. So I don't really see a disconnect between my life in the counterculture and my embrace of modern technologies. So, and one thing that they talked about is really fascinating, that I got all these interviews, which are now unavailable. Hopefully I still have the audio files, and I spent, hundreds of hours, but I spent a lot of time tripping on LSD and cutting up all these interviews with like Pigpen. But one thing that they talked about, I think it was Pigpen or the other guys, they talked about these experimentations where they would create this hive mind and how they would entrain this hive mind and had all these different types of things and all these different types of psychic things. But one of the things they were working for was this hive mind, and they had specific techniques to induce it. And he talks about the various criteria and how people, and he said something like, you can't let someone else's energy get into you because people would actually go insane. And I had it say, yeah, we'd known people that lost it and had to be locked up in the funny farm. Ha ha ha. Because when you're in the hive mind, and then you don't really have those barriers between people and someone else's energy comes. So they were doing hive mind experimentation in very great detail. And that's, again, of course, what Jerry's talking about, the hive mind. But again, it's the
well, that's what the wall of sound was created for as well, Remember the wall of sound, all of the dead speakers, that huge wall of sound that they were using to hypnotize the audience. Remember that? We talked about that like 5 years ago.
Yeah, Owsley, man. Yeah, it's and the Grateful Dead, man. I mean, luckily, the first time I went to see him, I bought these mushrooms. I spent all my money, and then the dude I was with just started laughing at me because they were shiitake mushrooms. He's like, "You gonna make some Japanese food tonight?" I'm like, "Dude, look how much I got." He's like, "Yeah, well, we can get some miso soup." And that's how I'm lucky, though. I probably, if I had been on mushrooms, I probably wouldn't be here talking to you today. I'd be, hanging out with Hillary. But go ahead and dive in. I just wanted to throw some of those broader context things in there and just continue what you're doing because it's super interesting.
Dive into which aspect?
No, you're just going through all the history of the LSD and all those connections.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I should probably write I could probably do a specific short paper just on questioning the whole Hoffman bicycle day story because it's such nonsense. And it's a story that I started tracking 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, and I ended up having Arthur Stoll's entire book translated from German into English so that I could go through it and see what the heck was being said there. And so I have a copy of that in English. But, the whole thing is just, it's nonsense, and so the official history with all of the SRI and CIA MKUltra people is that you shouldn't believe Willis Harriman on this one thing, but he's a really respectable guy and researcher on just about everything else, And he was who published the letters stating that Al Hubbard was a secret agent for the U.S. Army and, doing secret work, etc. So, but they want us to believe that we shouldn't just buy this one comment from Harriman discussing that Albert Hoffman's whole story is a totally made-up fraud. And I think that there's probably a lot more credence to it than they want us to believe,
Well, and we have to, I think one thing that people forget is that
let me just hold that thought.
Right, sure.
So the official story is that Hoffman invented LSD in 1948 and then discovers it in 1953 with the infamous retarded bicycle ride that all the hippies buy into. But it says, Harriman states that by 1938, they had created LSD, psilocybin, and about 30 other drugs. And I'm reading this from my Spies in Academic Clothing article. He claims that they began to synthesize them in 1935, but we know from St. Peter's Snow by Leo Perutz, published in 1933, that LSD must have been invented in or before 1933. Obviously, by 1938, they would have had to have known the outcome of what they were trying to do. And again, targeting the masses with drugs was hardly the way to stop a war created by the elite, which was a genocide against those very masses, which, of course, is what they're trying to do now, getting the kids hooked on drugs to genocide them, essentially. I mean, how many people died from these drugs and all this crap that the Grateful Dead had all promoted? And how exactly would they know 5 years later that releasing the drugs would somehow help the masses and end the war? It's, the whole story is absolutely ridiculous. It makes no logical sense on the official creation of LSD. So, and so then we see, and here's the citation for United States Army, Department of the Army, dated 23rd of November, 1970-something, and then the last number is blotted out, so you can't read it, excuse me. Stanford Research Institute Security Division. And, gentlemen, I have received certain documents from Special Agent A.M. Hubbard, or Al Hubbard, which was the Johnny Appleseed of LSD, given to me by Major William E. Smith. Very truly yours, Dolly B. Smith, Secretary to Major Smith. And then, so in the 1970s, the Department of Army is still calling Al Hubbard a special agent. And it's also clear that in 1970s, SRI was still involved with mind control operations headed by Willis Harriman, who in 1968 gave Hubbard the job as a special investigative agent. So this is all laid out in my article, Spies in Academic Clothing, that I've gotten so much flack for publishing, So anyway, go ahead. What was that thought you were holding?
I don't know, man. I'm tripping out watching myself. It's like this delay. It's like I'm seeing trails. Yeah, I really don't. I'm not really fat, but the angle of the camera makes me look fat. So that I'm like, I think I'm going to become anorexic or something.
It's just your 5 head,
Or maybe I'm actually a killer whale, dude. I don't know. But anyways, what I was going to say is that one thing people forget is that there was quite advanced levels of science in the 18th, well, especially 19th century. There was quite a lot of developments in sciences, especially in chemistry, even in areas of chemistry, physics, even in psychology, and things like that. And so there's a lot of things that you even start looking at, likening the mind to a computer. There's even early, types of,
cybernetics.
Yeah. Or for even formulating, computers and things like that. But and in the Victorian age, I just wanted to bring to people's mind that during the Victorian age, I mean, people were they were high all the time, man. You got your laudanum, you just go down to the drugstore, get your cocaine, of course, and many, many other types of drugs. So they're, synthesizing a variety of forms of extractions of, both cocaine and an opium plant. And in fact, the synthesization of the psilocybin is not okay. Well, I'm not an expert, but I think it's not quite as intensive a process to do that for the mushrooms. And of course, I mean, people had known, it's not like this is a new thing. I mean, the people knew about the stuff for thousands of years. It's not like, oh, suddenly we just discovered these guys are taking mushrooms. No, I mean, the lotus eaters, right? That, same with the Coleridge, or even going back, the Greeks talk about it. So it wasn't like some new thing of people taking hallucinogenic drugs and things like that, right? So, but again, so it stands, in my opinion, if you look at like 1938, if you look at some of these sort of destructive modalities that are occurring, that it may well be that they knew quite well what the effects of LSD would be on society. And so the cover story, right? And again, we always have to watch out about of positing that the government is a monolithic entity, right? It's not. So there's probably a lot of people. There were many people. You got, people that were, like Senator McCarthy.
That was Marty Lee and Bruce Slane's crappy argument in Acid Dreams that I exposed. In fact, they said, they use those exact words. Here, let me, that was Jay Stevens, I think. Or hold on, let me see. Let me just check here really quickly. I think there was another one. Oh, yeah, so that was Marty Lee and Bruce Slane. The CIA is not an omniscient, monolithic organization, and there is no hard evidence that it engineered the great LSD conspiracy, or a great LSD conspiracy, which, of course, in this article I show is complete horseshit, as is their book. Marty Lee and Bruce Slane, the book Acid Dreams is hands down the worst book written on CIA mind control there is. They use so much misdirection. In fact, they cite the video of Leary and these guys admitting that they're undercover agents. They cite the video 5 times and then omit that they admit they're undercover agents, in that. So, like Leary admitting our undercover agents in Los Angeles were very cool about, and yet they did more in a very laid-back way, and it's every bit, and it's never been as public as some of the other, the buses running around the country painted in day glow. And that's Leary right there admitting that he was an agent. But, that's not the only place that Leary admits he's an agent. Let me see.
And let me qualify my statement.
Let me just read this quote, and then I'll pass it back over to you. So Leary says, I proceeded as an intelligence agent since 1962, understanding that the next war for control of this planet and beyond had to do with the control of consciousness. Yes, he answered strongly, I was a witting agent of the CIA. And then you have, nonsense like Marty Lee and Bruce Slane, the worst, spin artists in history, trying to cover up all of the evidence.
Yeah. Well, no, what I want to state is that the CIA are the good guys, man. Come on. Don't diss the CIA. No. Yeah. No, what it says, you have to.
I think there are a lot of good guys in government, but the vast majority of the people in the CIA aren't them.
No. Of course, yeah. And that's what I was trying to posit is you have this divisionary tactic. So you have a lot of people. At least some people, say in the FBI and the Senate. Of course, you have a lot of people also that are not there. But you have a large body of Americans that are looking at this deliberately. This total dissolution of societal values. And then as my father was a member.
Go ahead.
My father was in SDS, right? Students for Democratic Society, right? Back in the day. So I'm a far left Sieg Lenin. I know you say there's nothing like there's like the fist, I guess. No, but actually
that's the fist where you go around murdering anybody who doesn't believe you and saying it's the right that's the bad people.
Well, but just, to stress, because my dad showed me pictures, you see the anti-war rallies, there's a bunch of guys in suits and ties, well-dressed, with women wearing nice skirts, and they're very serious. And so that was the anti-war movement before LSD hit it, as people have said. But let me just read this quote here from Bertrand Russell, Influence Science Society, real quick, and then I'll pass it back to you. But so I wanted to say just to see this way that it works, right? So you think that's how guys like you and I, right? The hippies, you think you're going against the man, but actually,
you're falling right into it. You're being led down their intentional path. I'm Uncle Sam. How do you do? How you do, Jerry? I mean, once you start to see through these guys, but the thing is, then you go to the more diabolical kind of occult aspect of it, which ties into the Khilafat and all that negative Kabbalah stuff, which is their symbol of the snake, right? That's a 2-headed snake, so that people can listen to those shows about the Khilafat to understand the deeper level of this. Anyways, Bertrand Russell, physiology and psychology afford fields for scientific technique, which still await development. 2 great men, Pavlov and Freud, have laid the foundation. I do not accept the view that they are in any essential conflict, but what structure will be built on their foundations is still in doubt.
I think that the subject which will be of most importance politically is mass psychology. Its importance has been enormously increased by the growth of modern methods of propaganda. One of the most influential is what is called, quote, education. Religion plays a part, though a diminishing one. The press, the cinema, and the radio play an increasing part. It may be hoped that in time, anybody will be able to pursue anybody of anything. Sorry, it may be hoped in time that anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. One more time. It may be hoped that in time, anybody will be able to persuade anybody of anything if he can catch the patient young and is provided by the state with money and equipment. No periods. It's like a tongue twister. Anyways,
Yeah.
The subject will make great strides when it is taken up by scientists under a scientific dictatorship. The social psychologists of the future will have a number of classes of school children on whom they will try different methods of producing an unshakable condition that snow is black. Various results will soon be arrived at. First, number one, Jan, listen to these. Number one, that the influence of home is obstructive. Two, that not much can be done unless indoctrination begins before the age of 10. Three, that verses set to music and repeatedly intoned are very effective. Let's look at the copyright date. Anyways, so this is continue. Fourth, the opinion that snow is white must be held to show a morbid taste for eccentricity. And he goes on and on. Then it won't need armies or policemen. But, not only hit songs, stars, and soap operas, cyclically recurrent and rigidly invariable types, but the specific content of the entertainment itself is derived from them and only appears to change. The details are interchangeable. That's Adorno. Not only are hit songs, stars, and soap operas cyclically recurrent and rigidly invariable types, but the specific content of the entertainment itself is derived from them and only appears to change. The details are interchangeable. Okay, I'll leave it there. That's my little...
So, just to follow up with what you wrote, and this is what I wrote in Theugen's What's in a Name. I published this in, 2014. Though this may sound implausible at first, the purpose of making these substances more attractive was to intentionally sell them, and not just to patients in hospital wards and to those in a chair with their therapists, but especially to the youth and countercultures of the world. A nefarious purpose indeed. Here Leary reflects on Arthur Koelster's work regarding juvenilization. Quote, "From Koestler, I learned about juvenilization and the theory that evolution occurs not in an adult final form of a species, but in a juvenile, larvals, adolescents, pre-adults. The practical conclusion, if you want to bring about mutations in a species, work with the young. Koestler's teaching about pediomorphosis prepared me to understand the genetic implications of the 1960s youth movement and its rejection of the old culture."
Wow. By the way, Jan, that wasn't me. That was Bertrand Russell in 1953 that said that.
Right. So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was reading Leary's quote, and that quote from Leary can be found in that's from Flashbacks, page 387, and published in 1983, 1990. And also, I have another page quote going there to page 251 and 252. I don't know why I have 2-page citations there. Maybe an error. So it's one of those. It's either page 387 or 252, 253. There you go.
Yeah, and so, again, we're just...
They straight up admit it that they're going to attack the kids, and this is why they're promoting, pedophilia and transsexualness, and to school children at 5 years old, and promoting, having these tranny school, reading sessions and whatnot. That's what that's all about. It's to imprint this specific thing.
So here's this book actually that I was going to open up with. This book is called Sarah. See, you can ask the audience. I'm no longer looking at the chat. Like I said, I'll have to contact Freud after seeing myself as a, I don't know what
Whale?
it is. As a god, as a Roman god who's going to smash down to the sea. Anyone know this book, Sarah, written by J.T. Leroy? A friend of mine who I think is now pretty much a former friend had fought in all of this, we'll say this boy's writing. Okay. And so Sarah, J.T. Leroy, you can see all the great, even Suzanne Vega, the pop star, gives this book a wonderful little quote. Sarah's weird, darkly funny, and haunting. J.T. Leroy has a gift, blah, blah, blah. So you think it's Sarah. It's a nice book. This amazing, absolutely brilliant boy. It's got quotes up and down, best-selling, 10 books in the series. So Sarah is about, let me just read the back book. Cherry Vanilla, 12 years old, with a penchant for short skirts and makeup, has one dream: become the most famous lot lizard or truck stop whore in the business. With his blonde curls and his naked ambition, he is determined to be more woman than most. And to match his idol, rival, and mother, Sarah, adopting her name and sex, he heads off into the dangerous and fantastic worlds, pocketed away in the West Virginia wilds. On his journey for fame, he meets with sinister pimps, a luck-restoring jackalope, superstitious prostitutes who take him for a saint, and a host of bizarre and beautiful outcasts that make up his sensual, heartbreaking world. And so this book was supposedly written by this 14, 15-year-old child prostitute. J.T. Leroy turned out to have been a middle-aged Jewish lady that actually wrote all these books, and she got a little bit busted. But this is straight up child porn. It's a 12-year-old transsexual. It's all about sex. I mean, I can't even read it. You know, it's just, I don't even want to read anything from it. It's, but lucky, you know, I mean, but it's supposed to be written like.
Why don't you read one of your highlights and we'll leave it there. I don't want anybody, you know, puking while they're watching the show, and I don't want to puke into the microphone.
I don't even. I mean, of course, it's written when you're writing like a 14, 15-year-old illiterate, trailer. I mean, truck stop whore. I don't really want to read it. Okay, we pile on the LaLoop's purple Trans Am. Pooh climbs over me to sit next to LaLoop. We speed through winding back roads that make the tires screech and produce thick billows of red dust. I take little sips of the clear liquid in Pooh's jam jelly jar. And he goes, so the jam jelly jar, we can all, okay. It gets nasty. I'm not going to read any of it. I don't even want to read it.
Yeah,
but
let's
I just
advertise there.
No. I mean, but just think about this book, though. What's going on right now? I mean, this book was, Suzanne Vega. My name is Luca. Remember that song?
Yeah. David Marks just pointed out Mickey Mouse Club music and mind control for sure, and probably some pedophilia in there too.
But I mean, this was a whole series of books, right? And like I said, my friend was really into them. I never actually read the book. It was sitting there on my shelf, and I was like, God, what is this? And but of course, like I said, there's a little bit of controversy. But this stuff, okay, I guess it's okay if you're actually a 14-year-old, 16-year-old, former child prostitute. But when you're a middle-aged lady living in Manhattan writing this book, it's a little more questionable. But at the same time, we're here right now, right? Look where we are right now. And just leave it at that. Again, Club of Rome, limits to growth. Right now, what's going on with communitarianism? They're talking about voluntarily. What is that whole thing? The climate catastrophe brigade, and they're like, we're, you know what I mean? And this is the exact same.
I need to get, Greg Quinones back on the show. Greg, if you're listening tonight, I know you do listen often. Shoot me an email. I tried to write you last week to get you back on the show. Need to get you on so that we can revisit this whole issue once again, brother. And apparently we haven't covered it enough. So I want to cover the green economy fraud. Yeah,
the carbon, carbon dioxide, which is necessary for life on Earth.
Yeah, carbon is the building block of all life on Earth, and these nut job liberals want us to believe it's a pollutant, and it's like, you can't get any dumber than the crap that the liberals spew. It's pretty pretty wild.
but I just want to again just read that. I will read that Adorno quote. I'll break that down a little bit because I think it's really telling. Okay, not only are hit songs, stars, and soap operas cyclically recurrent. So as something I've talked about, and I didn't think of this quote, but we have all these cycles, right? So we have these recurring, these are cyclical forms, right? They go through a certain process, right? And it comes through and goes again, it comes through and goes again, right? So we're now in another sort of recurring process. Of course, every time it gets more amped up, and the rigidly invariable types. So, we see this, the green movement, whatever, you can go back and you see, same thing, with, Robespierre or whatever, you go back to the Reign of Terror, the 1848, in France and all that stuff. And just the way they were just, gutting people on the streets, and because they were passionately believed in they were right to make the world a better place. So, so it continues. But here's the thing. So we think this is what we've kind of gotten to is the structural forms. So when you have a group like Fish, which is also interesting, but then you see how this fits into and ties into this whole paradigm. And in fact, it's another iteration of it, which really helps you to sort of see that they're still running a certain way, running the same plot, but in the other way, you can also see that they very clearly have discussed that agenda. But anyways, next part is the specific content of the entertainment itself is derived from them. So that means the entertainment, even the political movements, which is politics is just entertainment, is derived from cyclically recurrent and rigidly invariable types or structure, right? And it only appears to change. The details are interchangeable, right? So that just, we could be talking about, Jimmy Savile or Jeffrey Epstein or so-and-so and so-and-so, so-and-so back infinitum. The details change, even the names change, but in fact, it's still the same exact, system. And
they just take, it's like a spiral, and they take it a step deeper or further each go around,
Yeah. And just one last thing on this line is something I've tried to, it seems really important to me is this dissolution of history, right? So we're outside of time, right? We're sort of cast out. It's like this parallel earth. They're creating this parallel earth. And you can just go look at all the new music videos and all that occult stuff and whatever. And just go on and on. But this parallel world, it's almost like pushing humanity outside of history into this sort of this, you describe it as maybe it's a satanic counterfeit world.
Corralled into a cybernetic shithole or something. What were you going to say?
No, that was my.
All right. So Blaxican in the chat says your group work has exposed psychedelics as mind control suggestive. That is why. Hold on, it just scrolled up. That is why we get the push to normalize the psychedelics. That's why there is also a push that's related to normalize pedophilia too. To use these drugs to open children up to satanic things. Don't let me get started on the cartoons nowadays. Very true, Blaxican. Thank you for that.
Yeah, let me just chime in there. I mean, this the sexual abuse of children is really, it's probably the fundamental method or modus to fracture, to create multiple personalities, because it destroys the psyche. And some friends of mine who are psychologists, one of them works at a major, hopefully he's not listening, probably won't talk to me again, that's okay, but works in a major clinic, and stuff like that. And what happens is actually and these are like very scientific people saying it almost imprints them with almost this sort of demonic doppelganger that just really is for the rest of their life. They can never shake it. And that's why a lot of times, people that their minds split, you fracture the mind. So to anybody, any of these sick son of a bitches who dare to say that, oh, this is good and helpful and, this and that. Yeah, maybe there's innocent exploration among kids. When an adult comes in, it does something. It's one of the most damaging, horrific things that can be done. So anybody promoting that should be seen as a purveyor of evil, and there is absolutely no excuse for it. It's the problem. I mean, it's almost probably better to kill someone then to sexually abuse them in terms of what's done to their life.
Well said. Well said. So this is probably a good spot to wrap it up, Hans. Get you back on soon. I think we ought to do another series, dude. It seems like we can't get enough of this stuff out there and wake people up,
Yeah. Well, I'm going to be traveling quite a bit here, but yeah, at least, sort of in between, man, try to hit it sometime, and yeah, because it's, and part of it though, too, man, to be honest, like, as I said, that, it's not exactly like, it's a great career move. Hey, Mr. Music Industry guy, what's up? Hey, but the thing is that, I do feel, on the other hand too, I feel like, if the stuff is archived, it's out there. So we have, you can keep going into the details, and stuff like that. But sometimes I do feel that I think having the big picture and then, to really, once you start to see everything and you're able to make that sort of inner journey to see how this has affected the world around you, how it directly intersects, or, even maybe not you personally, and you see that. And then there's this, I think there's kind of a compassion, but I think there's a sort of a stepping through of this. Right. And so that's kind of what, it's very important, because, I've experienced this, you have too. People, they identify so much with the stuff and because it really is, that's what identity do we really have?
Well, it goes back to the whole pediomorphosis thing, because they're programmed with this crap in junior high and high school, and then, if you challenge their graven images or their rock idols, they don't want to question those rock idols and the pile of crap that's been sold them, because they, want to be able to tap along to those songs and everything else. And it's easier for them to go along not realizing the whole Pied Piper, agenda to run them over the cliff. It's easier for them to, the whole ignorance is bliss mentality. But it takes a shift in consciousness to realize that when they're talking about rock idols and music idols, that this is literally referring to graven images and, false gods that they've sold the public. And so, it takes a lot of self-honesty and reflectiveness to be able to, shatter these illusions, to get out of Plato's cave and, come into the light, and especially to start, following and understanding what Logos is. That's a whole additional level, and it's funny is like I used to talk smack against the Bible all the time, and then you sit down and you read it and you read the New Testament, and it really does expose how all of this stuff works. And it's like, wow, how did I not see that before? But everybody presumes they're smarter than everyone else who, for not reading it. They presume they're smarter for not reading it, and they take the whole ignorance is bliss mentality. And then you sit down and you read it, and it's like, oh, well, it's explaining this and how all of this stuff works. And then they take the Bible and then they invert it to do all of these operations. And hence, why I call the Bible our operating manual, because it actually shows you how to navigate this crap without getting caught in it. So they don't have to just listen to Jan and Hans pump you up. They can actually, there's this old book that was put there that warned everybody about this same crap.
Was that a Saturday Night Live reference? My name is Hans. I want to pump you up. Yeah. I used to hate that, man. Maybe I loved it, but yeah. Well, I want to pump you up. How about anyone remember Burt Reynolds, Hooper? He's like, he did some of those movies are just so sorry that
I watched the Trans Am Smoking the Bear one recently. Yeah, that's all the whole thing. Hans, why don't you give out your email address so people can send you donations?
Yep. Okay. It's hansutter@hotmail.com. And my website, hansutter.com, which will be updated eventually, hopefully very soon. I have this, I do have some shows. I had extremely underground show. I probably got about 120 episodes of that on I'm going to start putting them up. I gave up with YouTube would not let me post anything. I mean, I was getting copyright violations of my own voice, just a blank screen with me talking. And I waited like 6 months, and then they resolved in the other party's favor. So what, you own my voice, dude? I don't know. But anyways, yeah, Hans Utter, HANSUTTER at hotmail.com and hansutter.com, mindcontrolmusic.wordpress.com. And, just I'm out and about, I may be in your town next week playing in a Grateful Dead cover band.
Yeah, what we ought to do is go through the 44 shows you and I have done and put together like an hour or two long clip of all of the best stuff just to drive it all home. I don't know what to do at this point. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say that. I just reached in my file cabinet because this is like the only show I didn't do any preparation for it. I told you, I kept thinking I was going to be late. I'm like, I'm not late yet. Yeah, what's going on? I just grabbed this one file folder. There's probably 100 pages plus in here just of notes, but there's so much material, and it's something that you can't really convey. You could just keep dropping names, but that's why we're kind of dancing around in order to illuminate. And there have been a lot of people that have borrowed, you're in my work, and I hear them even saying things like kind of misunderstanding and whatever. There's been a lot of people have done that, but so be it. But they can never touch the masters now. But there's a lot of material there. But again, the whole point is just that to gain an awareness, and that yes, there are very strong psychological effects of music, but also to see what you have to understand is that we have such. Probably not for everybody, but there's such an alienation, from nature, from historical tradition, from family, from identity, this whole thing that you have to rebel. And then so you lose that family structure, family tradition, and you go out.
There it is right there.
And so these moments when people were part of these countercultures were probably some of the few times they really felt like they were alive or happy in their lives. So there's really a poignancy to it. And that's why you have these guys in their 60s or 50s, 40s, whatever, jamming out to their, and they just never, because they never grow up and they can't let it go. So if you see that with that, reminds me of my dog, he's whining, doesn't have a bone or something. He's like, woo.
But it's funny. I'm glad you mentioned that. I got a neighbor right up the street here who recently was, talking to me about how he was all excited that he was going to see the Rolling Stones in concert, and the guy is in his 70s, got blood cancer, and he was acting like a little kid all excited to go to this freaking Rolling Stones concert, And then he was talking about how he had just gone and seen Paul McCartney. I was like, you mean Billy Shears? He's like, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. He's a total Hillary Clinton fan type. But it was pretty funny to see his reaction just, and this guy is just so, it's like, dude, you left high school 60 years ago. And you're still caught in the same freaking mindset,
Well, so is the whole culture, and that's what's happened. Even like EDM, electronic dance music, most of that stuff, came out in the 80s or 90s. And there is good music out there. You just, it's hard to hear, it's hard to find it. But all the bands, you got cover bands, and you got bands that sound like, bands that sound like bands, and it's kind of like Allen Ginsberg, because I write poetry, used to be really into poetry, and I have one of his books. It's called White Stains, same like that. I'm not going to touch that book again. There's a lot of stuff.
White Stains. Okay. Is that like Pearl Jam?
I never read the book, dude. I'm not sure. Yeah. It's like Pooh's honey jar or something. But,
wow, dude.
But what I'm saying is that some of these guys like Mick Jagger, he's this upper crust London School of Economics guy, and he's got this really annoying fake Southern drawl / I can see that you're 16 years old. I can't even do it. He's such an obnoxious phony. And at the same time, he's just, these guys, they had a good pocket. Charlie Watts is a fantastic drummer, but a lot of these artists, I think one of the things is, as opposed to just freaking out, realize how badly some of these artists suck. I mean, they're just, we're so trained to think that these people are great. Even like James Dean. I mean, James Dean is actually, he's a horrendously bad actor. I mean, he's hilariously bad. If you take away that patina, right, this idea of all these people that are promoted, see James Dean, he actually, well, in my opinion, I mean, some people may say he's great, but anyways, let's leave it there, Jan. I'm just,
yeah, all right,
rambling. May everybody have peace. And I hope that, some clarity comes. And also it's, I mean, honestly, just by
44 shows, one of these has got to hit and
440
people will wake up.
440 hertz. Well, it's out there, man. I believe in the power.
John Gearson, wait, you believe in Billy Shear's theory? Paul is dead? Come on, man. It's like, wow, you believe that that Paul McCartney suddenly grew like 6-8 inches overnight? Really? But so anyway,
depends on where you grew those inches, man.
Yeah. So anyway, folks, support the show, logosmedia.com, or you can go to Patreon there. Send us Bitcoin donations. Please support. We greatly appreciate you supporting and subscribing to the show. Hit the subscribe button there. Share it with your friends and family, etc. Maybe you can help somebody wake up. And don't forget, Hans and I have 43 other shows aside from this one, about 80-some hours worth of work exposing all of this stuff. Highly recommend you get through what you can, at least the Music, Mind Control, and Psychobiology series and maybe the Grateful Dead, even if you're not a fan, just so you understand how the mind control works and how they use pop culture and everything for this. Hans, once again, thanks for coming on. I really appreciate you. It's good to see you. Good to talk to you again. It's always a pleasure to have you, and I'm sure we'll have you back again. And it's, again, always a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you, Jan, and you have a wonderful evening. And, may the bed bugs not bite you and all that stuff. And, this is, but I do think, sorry, I just can't stop talking, Jan. Because
the Secret History of FM Radio is another one that's a mind blowing series you and I did.
Yeah, I think we should just put them out as like DVDs or something, man. And it's I do have this monstrous manuscript. By the way, I didn't even include the Music Mind Control book in the books I mentioned. So that thing's like, it's about 1,200 pages now, and I have to just go through. I need to hire some Mexican to edit it for me. Some illegal immigrant dude, Pedro. Hey, fun, Pedro, you want some more beer? Edit my book. Yeah, I used to work.
You can get it edited into the finest Spanglish.
I used to work this Mexican restaurant. Just last aside here. Hey, I haven't slept. I've been working for 26 hours straight. So you give me. I work at this Mexican restaurant. There's this Cuban chef, and he was this illegal immigrant from Cuba. He's this big dude, and he just there. He'd work, 18 hours a day, just drinking beer nonstop. And one day I said, "Hey, you're from Cuba?" He's like, "I'm Cuban, man." Yeah. And he started going, "La cucaracha." He jumped over that. He was about ready to cut me with the damn kitchen knife. I guess he hated Castro, and he just jumped over with a huge, cleaver in his hand, and like all those Coronas just wore off. And so that's a not out. I'm not racist. I'm not an evil racist. I'm not going to hire some Mexican.
But Hans, you're white, so by all the liberals, by definition, that makes you a racist Nazi. Even though the Nazis were liberals, the National Socialist German Workers Party, so they were totally leftist. But that's a whole other issue.
Yeah. Well, last thing I want to do, my new project, I'm doing something called the Privilege Project, and I want to hire maybe 3 to 4 guys. One guy just to shine my shoes. Another guy who'll walk in front of me and just kind of sweep the sidewalk. And then maybe some other guy that will like break out into a song. And
another guy to, repair your bathroom for you so you don't have to do it yourself.
No, they can't do any real work. They privilege, like one guy can brush the dust off my coat or something. I just love to see the controversy, like a white, just to shoot the video and have the guy like, Mr. Hans, cleaning my shoes. Mr. Hans, you got dirt on your shirt. It's just, I'm really bad with accents, and no one can tell. But anyways, all right, Jan, all the best, and talk to you soon, brother.
You too. Good night, everybody. Please support the show. See you next time, and we'll be back. Take care. Good night.